But so the first one we have was if it's not too personal, how do you feel your gender identity and sexuality has shaped the content you now create? Um, it's an interesting thing because, and this is something I was just like talking about last night before I record this as well, that it is in all of it. Like that is what I have been writing about the whole time, both like now that I have realized it and well before I did. Like most times when I'm making a video, and literally the one I just recorded as well, the ending is me being like, "Hey, the things you might think are subtext in this video are not subtext. I have understood why I'm making this and what I'm really writing about when I'm writing this piece." And I've gotten better with that as time has gone on, but I had this realization, like crying on the phone months ago, of just like where like I was, one of those nights where you're just kind of like bawling and don't really know why or what's wrong. And as I was like talking through it a little bit, I realized like, oh shit, I have been writing about the same thing for 3 years. Like there's one little line going through the video and it's gender identity and orientation and those things. Like that's the thing that I've been writing about the whole time that's going through them all. It's not as big in every video, but it is the basis for all of them. And that's something that I've actually, like, for better or worse, gotten pretty good at, is making videos that are about those things without really making the video about those things. And I feel like some people might even be watching it and not realizing like the identity things about myself, and what like the video is truly saying, which maybe is saying I should be more explicit about it, but that's always difficult to gauge when you're relying on having a wide audience to survive from your craft. But yeah, like some of the videos are very much entirely about that and shape the content I make. Like the fear of transformation, that was a video that I could like only have written about that concept from direct experience. Like I wasn't so much watching the anime because I was on Tokyo Ghoul and I'd seen that like years ago and a few times, where I wasn't specifically like watching that and going, oh, this is saying this, and then making the video. I was feeling that, having those experiences, which then I could take to look back at on the characters and go like, oh, this is what the series was kind of accidentally making a parallel to, because I don't think that Tokyo Ghoul was inherently about something like gender identity or things, but it certainly parallels to that with essentially exaggerating it and making up some new concept that doesn't exist in reality to showcase it. And so that's one of those ones where like the research in quotes for that is basically me going through my own feelings and understanding that, and then gauging the reactions that the writer gave the characters and trying to put those into my own terms and understand like, okay, someone might watch this and have an idea of why Kaneki reacts how he does to his change, but if I can put those fine details into it that I understand only from having experienced it myself, that will provide something new to it. And so those ones are very much like very, very informed by that, and very much like shape that whole video. Others, like kind of more general character analysis videos, like the really big one, the one that's always going to stick in my mind, is I can't remember if it was the original Madoka Magica video I did, but the one on Sayaka, the like profile of her, that's maybe 3 years ago now. That's one where I'm more not really like drawing from my direct experiences to then go back into the past, but more looking at this character, especially Kasai, because that's a character that I think, like the characters in Madoka Magica, you can really grow up with in a sense, which is interesting about it. But that's one more or less where that character in that piece, I was not informing the writing on it as much as it was informing me about myself, and then I was going to like pass that on. Where like everything I'm saying about the characters in some of those videos is in some way tied to something I learned about myself from that. I'm trying to like remember specifically with the Sayaka video, but if there are any more recently, the Tokyo Godfathers video, obviously the parts about Hannah in that video are kind of similar, where I look at someone undergoing that situation, and that like informs me something of like, instead of me going, oh, this is why they do that, like it was with the fear of transformation, it's me looking and going, oh, this is why I do that. Like when a series really goes and lays that out and helps you understand it. And so those videos are not so much informed by my own like identity and sexuality or anything, but I could still only make that video with that in mind, because I think the only reason it's powerful and that I want to talk about it and why people find it interesting is because I'm learning something about myself at the same time. But at the end of the day, it is all somewhat tied back to that, because I would not have started this if I wasn't unsure about my identity to some extent. And so really the whole thing exists because I was like a kid alone in their room going, who am I? And not knowing it, looking for that in series. Like, in my head, I was just like, oh, I want to watch some cool things and talk about them. And that is part of it, like me wanting to just share a thing I love with people. But another part of it is like the only reason I go into that kind of depth. And you can see this as the channel progressed from like reviews and funny things to more of these serious videos. It tracks directly with the more I'm trying to understand myself and realizing that is the point of the whole thing. Hopefully there was a good, satisfactory answer in there. A lot of these will probably be a bit more rambling and maybe tangential, but whenever I watch things like this, I think that's kind of how they always tend to be. But we'll go on to the next one. So this one is, I really appreciate your videos. When you watch media, are you looking for something to write about, or do the topics come out of retrospective thoughts? So like to kind of like put it in my own words so my brain can understand it, because humans are silly like that. Like if I'm finding, like if I'm going into a series looking for something to write or finding it early on versus like I watch the whole thing and then look for it. It is a mix of both. I won't like retread too much ground, because obviously you can tell like the fear of transformation video or the multiple series videos, or like me going back to say Psychopaths or Ergo Proxy, or like something I've watched before. Those are retrospective thoughts where I'm going, okay, I have this idea, this fits it, I can use that as a point to discuss it. But most of them, I have a vague idea of something I want to talk about in terms of like, oh, I want to talk something more mystical or more like identity related. Like, say like, oh, I like the soul or something like that is on my mind. Maybe I'll watch like an Evangelion like series, or, oh, I'm thinking about like the past and how I've lived my life. I'll watch more of a slice of life. So there's like some general vibes that go into the immediacy of what I choose to watch. But I take notes throughout as I watch. Like for a 24 episode series, I actually don't know the number off the cuff because the way I take notes has changed a lot over time. But I usually have like some 10 to 12 pages of notes on maybe like a 12 episode series. And that's just like bullet points. So it's not really like a whole 10 pages. But I'll be going through, and in trying to play like the YouTube game and needing to keep up with production and stay on a schedule and so on, I am definitely looking for a topic like quite early on. Like I'm not trying to force one. And that's something I try to be very careful of, is like, I don't want to force something into this that isn't there. And so I try to like generally keep notes on multiple different ideas while I'm going throughout. And I'll typically like bold some, underline some, italicize some to differentiate which lines of thought those are following. But it's generally like, I could say like if it's a 12 episode series, maybe like episode 3 or 4, usually after like the first third, if it's a good series, you're going to catch that line that the author is running throughout. And I think I've gotten pretty good at catching that, and I'll have an idea, and then I can like zero in on, okay, this is what I'm looking for from the rest of the series. Like with, I don't know why Lane's popping to mind, because the notes for that one were actually a mess. I almost hated the series when I watched it the first time. But like that one, very much like you get the sense early on, like, okay, this is identity, like that's what's going on here. And so the rest of my viewing is informed by me picking up on that. I feel like there was something else in there interesting my brain wanted me to say, but yeah, I'd say majority of the time as I've kind of progressed into less of a multiple series, one topic style, into more of just like going into greater depth on single new series. It's become more of the former, where like I'm finding something or looking for something to write about during the watch and not going back after. I think it's just because, at least for me, it's harder to go back after to try and like recall everything. But I do keep like general plot point notes in like what's happening, so I can do that quicker if need be. Although I never go back to notes past the original watch. Like if I go back to talk about a series again, I am not using my original notes, but I'm taking a whole other set of notes. Just because like once your brain loses that specific wording, like you can write something. Like this happens a lot with how I name my clips. I'll name it like, I'm trying to think of it like beach and then comma night, like say for a clip that covers like characters having something happens on a beach and then something happens afterwards as they're talking at night. And whenever you like first do it, like say you take that in your notes, like speak on beach, speak around fire at night, it makes a lot of sense when you're there in the moment looking at it with it still fresh in your mind, because that's just a little reminder for your brain to go, oh, they talked about the stars or whatever it was. But going back and looking at it, say like a year later, you're like, what does this mean? I have no idea what this short series of text is actually referring to, because it's not fresh in your mind anymore. That was a complete sidetrack from the thing I started talking about that was probably more interesting. Yeah, although I probably gave maybe even too much detail there, but that's probably good for that question. For the last one we have, what inspirations did or do you draw from when making your videos? Was your current format more directly inspired by video essays, or was it more of a combination of multiple genres of YouTube videos? This one's actually like genuinely very interesting to me, because I hate talking about myself, but I love talking about my work and the inspirations and things behind it, because then I'm talking about like other people and how it all came together, which like I think that idea of like when you try to trace those lines back and look at how you are the way you are and why you do what you do, like it's very interesting to see how they intersect, because like there's no way that another person has that exact same intersection. Like it is very much a sign of like everyone is unique in some way, because we will reach the same point through very different means. But in terms of like being inspired by other video essays, it really wasn't. I honestly didn't really watch them until after I started making them myself. I think the closest I got to it, and this is very much like if this channel didn't exist, I wouldn't be here. Like it showed me what YouTube can really do in terms of like teaching or informing, or inspiring just thought in general, was Vsauce. And that might be kind of where I also got the multiple series, one topic video essays from, because he very much, like Michael always, the quote that sticks out to me is, he said, I believe it was whenever he was teaming up with Adam Savage for Brain Candy, he explained it as trying to draw people in with something that seems like generally interesting and then tricking them into learning throughout. And so he would have these very tangential topics, but that all related back to the same point. Like the probably best example is the video, What Does Human Taste Like? Where it is both what does human taste like and what would it taste like if you ate human, as well as what does human taste like in terms of what do humans like taste-wise. Where like it's pulling from these different areas and just trying to impart interesting things on you that maybe you'll go, that's really interesting, and you look at it yourself, and like that leads you to something new and interesting of your own volition, which is very much what I'm trying to do. Like I don't think that because I don't want to, because I'm not fit to, no one is fit to guide other people. But if I can leave that one little like nugget of interest that makes someone go like, oh, I didn't realize that about myself, and then they take the volition to understand that in their context, in their life, and like grow and change from that. If I can just provide that little bit, that's kind of what I'm trying to do. And so Vsauce was really the inspiration there with like, I forget how I stumbled on those videos. I mean, well back in, that would have been maybe 2010, 2011, when I would have started watching that. Well, still like late middle school, early high school, so on. But yeah, without that, both in terms of like showing me you could do more, and also that idea of like just vague, like just giving people enough to like learn something on their own, is the closest I got to video essays before making video essays myself. But I don't think I would consider Vsauce's typical video essays. They're more of like a variety, almost like educational, personal variety show, in that it has like the aesthetics of video essays without quite being the same as them. It almost might even be like a progenitor of what the genre became. So that's like, now I watch a lot of video essays, especially because I like to keep up and know what other people are doing, and also because it's just really fucking interesting. Like, I know nothing about fashion, but I love watching people just like talk about like fashion trends or analyzing like internet discourse, even though I'm somehow chronically offline for doing what I do. Because it's just like seeing what people can do with it and the perspective they can put on it. And also, like, as someone who makes it, now that I make it, they've become very interesting to me, because I can see like how other people are doing it and organizing the information and what's being included and what isn't, and how is the flow of it going through, how are they like physically presenting it, like, is it, how much face to camera, how often does it cut? Like, there's a lot of interesting things that have, if you could like watch the videos I'm watching and then watch my content, you would definitely see where I'm being inspired by other video essay people. But that definitely came after I started making them. I kind of just stumbled into it, wanting to talk about the things I liked and thinking I somehow knew what made things good and what didn't. But before that, I was inspired to make videos first. I saved up a bunch of birthday money and bought a 4th generation iPod Touch so I could finally like watch YouTube on my own, because before that it was like a crappy computer in the basement, like XP desktop situation. So that, like, having it on me at all times, being able to like be a bit away and personal and watch my own stuff like on my own account, is where I really started first seeing like getting inspired by it. And kind of like the second I saw it was a job, I was like, yeah, I want to do this, and I was trying to do it. The current channel has existed for almost 9 years now. We're actually just about to come up on 9 years. And it's existed in its current form for 4 or 5. But the first time I started posting was 16 years ago, maybe even earlier than that. So like, I've been trying at this for over half my life at this point. So it takes a lot. Persistence pays off, but not very quickly when you're working into a saturated market. But so my inspirations before that, because the channel originally started as a joint gaming channel, like two people playing one game, like in the same room style thing with me and, at the time, my best friend. So I was, oh God, it's so that is where I was inspired more by like gaming content, which actually you can still see the influence of in what I do currently, because the big ones for me were Many a True Nerd, especially his Fallout series and Nerd Cubed just overall for like the Play series and everything that came out of it, and just the kind of wild stuff he's done and that he's still doing it now, like so many years later. But they very much inspired me to like go on and do gaming stuff, which isn't very interesting considering I don't do it anymore. But the way that I handle sponsorships, and the ethics that I want to put into it and keep, of like, I know my words have power over people. I have to be careful with that and respectful of that. That very directly comes from Nerd Cubed, and how he has like never taken sponsorships and remained very ethical, and like open and honest the whole time. So like without him, I would probably be a much worse YouTuber, which means a better YouTuber in terms of growth, but a worse one in terms of morality. Many a True Nerd very much influences it in the form of like that I am long form content. I'm not editing out every pause. I trust my viewers to like be interested in something and stick with it long term, even if it is just sometimes a background noise thing. And to be like interested in the topic, like that trust I have for people watching it, and the ability to go long form and not be like punch, 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 edit, 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 attention, 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 comes directly from me having watched Many a True Nerd for over 10 years at this point. Before that, the very first things that inspired me were Dan and Phil. Dan is not on fire now. Dan Howell and Amazing Phil. More specifically Dan, because that's just my kind of more existential, depressed vibe, which again, you can kind of see where like I first was seeing that was an interesting thing, even though he didn't like directly address philosophy in his videos or anything. Like that thought process, like seeing other people had it and understanding what it kind of was, you can see how that's led into what I do now. But they like, that was whenever I was kind of like, I saw them and was like, wait, this is like a job people have, just like telling stories about their life and being a little bit funny, but like also a little bit more serious and like existential and things. Like that's the second I saw that's when those were the first videos I made where I was like, I'm just going to talk about my life as if I know it. I was like 12 years old thinking I could be Dan and Phil. It was horrible, awful, but like I got it out of the way early. I got like a little bit more comfortable with like sharing that kind of personal side of things. Without those two and without Dan specifically, that kind of like lo-fi like person talking about their experience that like shows through in the end of videos where I just kind of break it down a little bit more and I'm like, here's the point a bit more directly. Here's me talking about my experience. Here's you not being alone in the world because someone else is having these weird thoughts. That has been there from day one, is very much carried forward from what those two did, just talking in their bedroom, which is what I've been doing literally the whole time. I don't know if there's a single video I've made that has not been filmed in a bedroom, because when it started we were in my friend's bedroom. But yeah, like that's like, those are kind of the big three areas. I watch a lot of gaming stuff despite not really doing gaming myself. Dan and Phil had a lot in Vsauce, although now he's like mostly just doing shorts and Curiosity Box stuff. Those are kind of the ones that like the three weird things that like came together to make what I'm doing now, all with their little sections. And then the rest of it was just kind of what I talked about with the earlier questions, like that this is just me like trying to understand myself, but not realizing that, and the aesthetics of it, the form that it took, the flow of it was inspired by those kind of three directions. Yeah, I think that's everything I had. I kind of covered all that was in my notes and a little bit more. I think that went really well. Hopefully there was something interesting in there. I didn't expect it to be 30 minutes, or 25, 16, 17, 18. It'll probably be shorter for you because I'll have to edit out a few pops and different things, although I don't have any pauses to take out, and I wouldn't anyway, because if you're already paying me for content, like I don't think you're gonna get mad at me for there being half a second of dead space in between my words. That's like my pet peeve for YouTube editing, right? Is whenever people have a face to camera bit and they cut out like, okay, say I'm talking and I'm saying a sentence like this and I go this, I say a thing, think for a second, maybe it's that way, okay, I've reached my point. When someone takes that and they edit out every pause so that it's like 3 words cut, 3 words cut, 3 words cut, I loathe that so much. Just, I know that like analytics and everything, attention span, blah, 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 but like, just leave it in. It's fine. I think that's one of those things that like only happens because, right, like there are the big YouTubers who do that, like blah, 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 attention, 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 because they have the time and energy to pay someone to edit it and do all those flashy things. So then that becomes taken as the successful part of it, like that style and editing, even though that's not actually what's making it appealing to people. But it just becomes accepted as that because no one actually knows what's making it work. There are no true analytics that show you what is working and what isn't working. It's just what happens to catch it at the right time. So anytime someone tells you they know what makes it work or what you have to do, they're lying. It's just vibes and they're guessing, even if they have a more informed guess than some other people do. But I think that style of editing is one of them, where it is not truly what works, but because all the big channels have the ability to do it, and so it becomes associated with success, people start doing it. And I'm not immune to it. Like, I started doing that. That's why for the longest time, my videos were like, okay, I'm doing face to camera, punch in a little bit. And then I started watching more video essays again after like taking a little break. And I was like, I'm super interested in this video that is someone just monologuing to the camera for 2 minutes without a single cut in it, even if they're talking dryly, because it's an interesting thing. And so that's why I made the change recently of like, I'll still keep the clips. I'll have some different effects for how they come on screen and blur out the background and so on. But like, I'm no longer doing those cuts and punches in because it doesn't need it. I'm trusting the people to have the attention and be interested in it. That was entirely unnecessary, but like, there are some things that like this might be good for me to get out because they're things I can't make a full video on, but like I have in my head bouncing around constantly and want to say. And I think you all actually asked some questions about those things, which was like very encouraging to see. All right, that will wrap things up for that one. A little bit different. This was originally a Q&A I did over on Patreon, where supporters there of any tier could ask me questions and I'd give them an answer and so on. Also, as a quick note, I enabled channel memberships. You can get all the same stuff I'm talking about for Patreon, but by doing the same thing here with YouTube's own channel member thing that you can see next to the channel name and all that. Anyway, back to the actual thing. I was milling about if I wanted to post it here as a preview of that because I hate paywalling anything. This is something I'd love to do for free. It was actually very fun to put this all together and answer these questions that I think a lot of people want to ask and think would make for interesting videos and would, but don't do very well on YouTube when you do something like this. I know this video will not do very well. But YouTube has been interesting recently with money, and although I don't want to focus on the money, the more I can get things up here, the more I can put into making them better, to not having to work a job outside of this, to doing more creative, interesting things and trying to put forth things that I think you will find interesting and that you all want from me. And so I do have to consider that to some unfortunate degree because I really, truly hate bringing money into it at all. I could rant about the whole concept of money for hours and my disdain for it. Anyway, so it's not something I really wanted to do, but I think as a one-off, as a feeler, to advertise it a little bit more because I only ever stated at the end in different things, I'm gonna try it. So if you want access to these moving forward, I haven't done more on Patreon as I've been kind of gauging the interest, but if we get people really showing an interest to hear more like this, I'll go ahead and keep doing them over there for supporters of any tier. And if not, don't worry. There's never going to be like full-on videos gated over there. I don't even like doing early stuff. It's literally just a little bonus thing. I want to keep giving everything you love for free. That's something I want to keep doing. I don't want to bring money into it. But it is just a nice thing that, if we can get a little bit more going over there, it can really help basically alleviate the worries of my life so that I can make this stuff better. Really go in on this, which is what I want to do, and then branch out into other great creative things too. Anyway, that was probably a little bit too long of a rant anyway, but I don't know, I just really want to explain things. I think just putting this up without explaining it would be so weird, and I hate asking for money. So I wanted to at least put a little personal explainer at the end and stress once more, do not feel like you have to give me anything. I will keep doing this and doing it for free. It's just if you can and find it worthwhile, it's something greatly appreciated. But otherwise, thank you for your time as always. This is a little bonus thing, so it's not going to take the slot of a regular video or anything, but I appreciate you spending time here as always. And thank you for your support, whether that's stupid money or whether that's just a like or a comment or sharing it, whatever it might be. Just literally your time is so valuable and you're giving it to me. That's insane. But anyway, so these moving forward will be a Patreon thing. Let me know feedback on them. If it's like, hey, if you do it with a face camera, then I'll be more likely to watch it. Whatever your feedback is to make it more something you'd want, let me know how that will influence your decision. But anyway, thank you again for your time and for watching and everything. And I'll just say, hope I'll see you again soon.